In a world where silence speaks louder than words, two souls find themselves bound by an invisible thread, their hearts echoing secrets only love can decipher. But when whispers from the past rise like ghosts, will their connection be enough to silence the chaos, or will it unravel under the weight of unspoken truths? The cafe was tucked away on a quiet street, its windows fogged with the warmth of steaming drinks and the hum of low conversations. Emma sat in her usual corner, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup, her mind wandering as it often did. She liked the anonymity here, the way the world outside seemed to blur into a distant hum. But today, something felt different. The air was charged, as though the universe had paused, waiting for something or someone. The bell above the door chimed softly, and she glanced up, almost instinctively. That's when she saw him. Liam. He stood in the doorway, his dark coat dusted with rain, his eyes scanning the room as if searching for something he couldn't quite name. Their gazes met, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. It wasn't just his striking features, the sharp jawline, the tousled hair, the intensity in his eyes. It was something deeper, something she couldn't explain. It felt like recognition, as though her soul had been waiting for this moment without her even knowing it. He hesitated, then walked toward her, his steps deliberate but uncertain. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, his voice low and warm, like the first sip of coffee on a cold morning. She shook her head, unable to find her voice, and he slid into the chair across from her. There was an ease between them, an unspoken understanding that defied logic. They talked for hours, the world outside fading into insignificance. Words flowed effortlessly, as if they were picking up a conversation they'd started lifetimes ago. But it wasn't just the conversation. It was the way he looked at her, as though he could see past the walls she'd built around herself. It was the way his laughter made her feel lighter, as though she'd been carrying a weight she hadn't even realized was there. And it was the way his presence seemed to quiet the noise in her mind, replacing it with a sense of calm she hadn't felt in years. As the hours passed, the cafe emptied, leaving them in a cocoon of soft light and quiet. Emma found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone, her fears, her dreams, the parts of herself she usually kept hidden. And Liam listened, not just with his ears but with his entire being, as though her words were a map to a treasure he'd been searching for all his life. But then, just as the conversation lulled, he said something that sent a shiver down her spine. "Do you ever feel like we've met before?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. Because she had felt it too, that strange sense of familiarity, as though their souls had crossed paths long before this moment. Before she could respond, a faint sound interrupted them, a whisper, so soft it could have been the wind. But it wasn't the wind. It was a voice, faint and distant, yet unmistakable. Emma's eyes widened, and she saw the same confusion reflected in Liam's gaze. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice trembling. He nodded, his expression a mix of curiosity and unease. The whisper came again, this time clearer, though the words were still indistinct. It wasn't threatening, but it carried a weight, a sense of urgency that made her heart race. Liam reached across the table, his hand covering hers, and the touch sent a jolt of warmth through her. "Whatever it is," he said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty in his eyes, "we'll figure it out together." And in that moment, Emma knew that her life had changed. This wasn't just a chance encounter, it was the beginning of something she couldn't yet understand. The whispers were a mystery, a puzzle waiting to be solved. But for now, all that mattered was the man sitting across from her, his hand in hers, and the unspoken promise that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The cafe grew quieter, the world outside darker, but the connection between them burned brighter than ever. And as they sat there, their souls whispering secrets only they could hear, Emma realized that this was just the beginning. The whispers had started it all, but where they would lead, she couldn't yet say. All she knew was that for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. Because when souls whisper, love answers. And love, she was beginning to understand, was the most powerful force of all. The days that followed their meeting at the cafe were a blur of stolen moments and deepening connection. Emma and Liam found themselves drawn to each other with an intensity that defied reason. It wasn't just the ease of their conversations or the way their laughter seemed to sink effortlessly. It was something deeper, something that felt almost predestined. Yet, beneath the surface of their growing bond, the whispers lingered, faint but persistent, like a melody they couldn't quite place. One evening, as they walked through the city park, the air crisp with the promise of autumn, Emma brought it up. "Do you ever think about that day at the cafe?" she asked, her voice tentative. "The whispers, do you still hear them?" Liam paused, his hands shoved into his coat pockets, his breath visible in the cool air. "Sometimes," he admitted, his tone thoughtful. "It's like they're always there, just out of reach. But when I'm with you, they're quieter. It's like you calm them somehow." Emma nodded, her chest tightening with a mix of relief and unease. She felt it too, the way the whispers seemed to fade when they were together, only to return when she was alone, more insistent than before. "What do you think they mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Liam shook his head, his expression troubled. "I don't know, but I feel like they're trying to tell us something. Something important." That night, Emma dreamed of a place she'd never been, a sprawling meadow under a sky painted with stars. In the dream, she was running, her heart pounding, though she didn't know why. Ahead of her, she saw Liam, his figure silhouetted against the moonlight. He turned to her, his eyes filled with a mixture of love and sorrow, and reached out his hand. But before she could take it, the ground beneath her gave way, and she woke with a start, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The dream left her unsettled, and when she met Liam the next day, she could tell he'd had a restless night too. "I had the strangest dream," he said before she could speak. "We were in this field and you were there, but it felt so real, like it was a memory." Emma's eyes widened. "I had the same dream," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What does it mean?" They spent hours trying to make sense of it, poring over books and articles about dreams, past lives, and unexplained phenomena. But the more they searched, the more questions they uncovered. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as though urging them to dig deeper. One evening, while sitting in Liam's apartment, surrounded by scattered notes and half-empty coffee cups, Emma found herself staring at an old photograph he'd shown her. It was of his grandmother, a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "She used to talk about soulmates," Liam said softly. "She believed that some connections transcend time, that souls find each other again and again." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "Do you think that's what this is?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Liam hesitated, then nodded. "I don't know how else to explain it. The dreams, the whispers, the way I feel when I'm with you, it's like I've known you forever." As the weeks passed, the whispers began to take on a new form. They weren't just faint echoes anymore. They were fragments of memories that didn't belong to either of them. Emma would catch glimpses of a life she'd never lived, a cottage by the sea, a stormy night, a promise made under the stars. Liam, too, began to experience these flashes, though his were different. A battlefield, a letter sealed with wax, a name whispered in the dark. One night, as they sat by the fireplace in Liam's apartment, Emma finally voiced the question that had been haunting her. "What if this isn't just about us? What if it's about something bigger, something we're supposed to remember?" Liam stared into the flames, his expression. "Again," she echoed, her voice trembling. Liam looked away, his jaw tight. "I don't know why I said that. It just felt right." Emma's chest tightened, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice breaking. "What if we're not strong enough to face this? What if the past is too much?" Liam reached for her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "We don't have a choice," he said softly. "We have to face it. Together." But the cracks were already forming. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and the dreams became more vivid, more haunting. Emma began to see flashes of a life she didn't recognize, a life filled with love, but also with pain. And Liam, too, seemed to be unraveling, his calm demeanor giving way to moments of frustration and anger. One night, after a particularly heated argument, Emma found herself standing alone in her apartment, the journal clutched in her hands. She flipped through the pages, her eyes landing on a passage she hadn't noticed before. The past is a shadow, but it cannot define us. Only by facing it can we break free. The words struck a chord deep within her, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. She called Liam, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "We need to talk," she said. "Not about the whispers or the dreams or the journal. About us. About what we're going to do next." He arrived within minutes, his face etched with worry. "I'm sorry," he said as soon as he walked through the door. "I've been so caught up in all of this that I forgot what really matters."
"You. Us."
Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry too," she whispered. "I let the past scare me, but I don't want it to control me anymore. I don't want to lose you." Liam pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "You won't," he said, his voice firm. "Whatever this is, we'll face it together. No more running, no more hiding. Just us." And in that moment, the whispers faded, replaced by the steady rhythm of their hearts beating in sync. The past was still there, a shadow lurking at the edges of their lives, but it no longer held the same power over them. They had each other, and that was enough. For now, that was everything. The days that followed their decision to face the past together were marked by a quiet determination. Emma and Liam no longer ran from the whispers or the dreams. Instead, they embraced them, allowing the fragments of memory to guide them. The journal became their constant companion, its pages filled with cryptic messages and half-told stories that seemed to mirror their own lives. But this time, they approached it with a sense of purpose, determined to uncover the truth no matter where it led. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace in Emma's apartment, Liam pointed to a passage in the journal that had previously gone unnoticed. "Listen to this," he said, his voice steady but tinged with excitement. "It mentions a place, a cliff overlooking the sea. The writer says it's where it all began and where it ended." Emma's breath caught in her throat. "The cliff for my dream," she whispered. "Do you think it's real?" The next morning, they set out to find it. The journey took them to a remote coastal town, its rugged beauty both haunting and familiar. As they stood on the edge of the cliff, the wind whipping around them, Emma felt a surge of déjà vu. "This is it," she said, her voice trembling. "This is the place for my dream." Liam nodded, his expression a mix of awe and apprehension. "It feels like we've been here before," he said softly. "Like we've stood here 1,000 times." They spent hours exploring the area, searching for any clue that might connect the cliff to the journal. It wasn't until they stumbled upon an old, weathered gravestone hidden among the tall grass that they found what they were looking for. The inscription was faded, but they could just make out the names: Eleanor and Thomas. Beneath the names were the words, "Bound by love, separated by fate, reunited in eternity." Emma's knees buckled, and Liam caught her, his arms wrapping around her as she stared at the gravestone. "It's us," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It's always been us." Liam held her tighter, his own emotions threatening to spill over. "We were here," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "In another life, we were here." The discovery unlocked something within them, a flood of memories that had been buried for centuries. They remembered everything: the love they had shared, the promises they had made, the storm that had torn them apart. Eleanor and Thomas had been their names, their lives a tapestry of joy and heartbreak that had ended too soon. But even in death, their love had endured, a bond so strong it had transcended time. As they stood there, the wind carrying the whispers of their past, Emma felt a sense of peace she hadn't known was possible. "We found each other again," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "After all this time, we found each other." Liam nodded, his eyes glistening with tears. "And this time, we won't let anything tear us apart." The journey back home was quiet, the weight of their discovery settling over them like a warm blanket. They no longer feared the whispers or the dreams. Instead, they saw them as reminders of the love that had brought them together, not just in this life, but in every life they had lived. The journal, once a source of mystery and fear, now felt like a gift, a testament to the enduring power of their connection. In the weeks that followed, they began to rebuild their lives, stronger and more certain than ever. The past no longer haunted them. It was a part of them, a story they carried with pride. They visited the cliff often, finding solace in the place where their love had begun and ended, and where it had been reborn. One evening, as they sat on the edge of the cliff, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Emma turned to Liam, her heart full. "Do you think we'll remember this life in the next one?" she asked, her voice soft. Liam smiled, his hand finding hers.
"I don't know," he said.
"But it doesn't matter. As long as we find each other, that's all that counts." Emma leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder as the first stars appeared in the sky. The whispers were silent now, their message finally understood. Love had been the answer all along, the thread that had bound them across lifetimes, the force that had brought them back together time and time again. As the night deepened, they sat there, their hearts beating in unison, their souls whispering the same truth they had always known. They were meant to be together, not just in this life, but in every life that followed. And as long as they had each other, they could face the years that followed their discovery on the cliff were filled with a quiet, unshakable certainty. Emma and Liam built a life together, one rooted in the understanding that their love was not bound by time or circumstance. The whispers, once a source of confusion and fear, became a gentle reminder of the bond they shared, a bond that had endured across lifetimes and would continue to do so, no matter what lay ahead. They returned to the cliff often, not as a place of sorrow, but as a sanctuary. It was there, with the sea stretching endlessly before them and the wind carrying the echoes of their past, that they felt closest to the truth of who they were. The gravestone of Eleanor and Thomas remained a silent witness to their journey, a testament to the love that had defied even death. Each visit was a celebration, a reaffirmation of the promise they had made to each other, not just in this life, but in every life they had lived. Their days were filled with the simple joys of being together. They traveled, explored, and created memories that felt both new and familiar, as though they were retracing steps they had taken long ago. The journal, now worn and fragile, remained a cherished possession, its pages a map of the love that had guided them through the darkest of times. They added their own entries, documenting their journey and the lessons they had learned along the way. It became a living testament to their story, one they hoped would inspire others to believe in the power of love. As the years passed, the whispers faded entirely, their purpose fulfilled. Emma and Liam no longer needed them. They had found the answers they had been searching for. The dreams, too, became less frequent, replaced by a deep, abiding peace that came from knowing they had faced their past and emerged stronger for it. They had unraveled the mystery, not just of the whispers, but of their own hearts, and in doing so, they had found a love that was unshakable. One evening, as they sat on the porch of the small cottage they had bought near the cliff, Emma turned to Liam, her eyes filled with a quiet contentment. "Do you think we've done it?" she asked, her voice soft. "Do you think we've finally broken the cycle?" Liam smiled, his hand reaching for hers. "I don't know if the cycle was ever meant to be broken," he said. "Maybe it was just meant to be understood. And we've done that. We've found each other, and we've chosen to stay. That's all that matters." Emma nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had spent so much of her life searching for something she couldn't name, and now she knew it had always been him. Liam had been the answer, the constant in a world that had often felt uncertain. And she had been his. Together, they had rewritten the story, not by erasing the past, but by embracing it and allowing it to shape their future. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Emma leaned into Liam, her head resting on his shoulder. The world around them was quiet, the only sound the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant crash of waves against the cliffs. It was a moment of perfect stillness, a moment that felt like the culmination of everything they had been through. "I love you," she whispered, the words carrying the weight of lifetimes. Liam pressed a kiss to her forehead, his voice steady and sure. "I love you too. Always have, always will." And in that moment, they knew that their story was far from over. It was simply entering a new chapter, one filled with the same love and devotion that had carried them through every life they had shared. The whispers had led them here, to this place of peace and understanding, and now they could move forward, unburdened by the past and unafraid of the future. As the stars began to appear in the night sky, Emma and Liam sat together, their hands intertwined, their hearts beating in unison. They had faced the shadows, confronted the echoes of their past, and emerged stronger for it. And now, as they looked out at the vast, endless sea, they knew that their love was as boundless as the horizon. The journey had been long, filled with twists and turns, but it had brought them here, to each other, to this moment, to this love. And as they sat there, side by side, they knew that no matter what lay ahead, they would face it together. Because when souls whisper, love answers. And love, they had learned, was the greatest truth of all.